So welcome everyone. So good to see you this evening, and I'm pleased to welcome Alyssa Bradley. Alyssa works via the Delaware Center for Justice, and she is the coordinator for the Delaware Poor People's Campaign. Delawareans have been interested in participating in the Poor People's Campaign for some time and had been looking for some leadership in organizing our efforts and linking with the national organization. And so Alyssa is the person filling that role. I will turn it over to you. And Alyssa, feel free to give a little more of your introduction if you'd like, or dive right into the materials, whatever you prefer. We're so glad you're here.
Thanks so much, Sue. It's great to be here. Good to see so many new faces. I feel like that's mostly what I've been doing for the last several months, is just meeting new people and spreading the word about what the Poor People's Campaign is trying to do in Delaware. So super happy to be here. A little bit more about me. I'm actually from New Jersey, but I live in Philadelphia. And so I came to know a little bit more about Delaware politics and policies from working in southeastern PA and the region with anti-hunger and anti-poverty advocacy. And so I heard about the Poor People's Campaign, and when I saw this position open, I knew I had to get involved. I come from a long line of healthcare workers. I am the black sheep of the family going into policy and politics. And I started my career in advocacy with environmental work, which still holds a very special place in my heart. It's my first passion, but I'm very, very happy to be here with all of you discussing how the Poor People's Campaign is moving to make sure that we are breaking the cyclical nature of poverty and low wage work here in America. So I will attempt to share my screen with you. I have a very short, very broad overview, little presentation for you all. And please feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. I'm not a stickler. There's no forum here. Like, just jump in and ask questions if you have them, but I will certainly leave time at the end for folks to ask questions as well. So without further ado, let me, Sue, can you enable screen sharing for me?
I certainly can. Sorry that I didn't do that before, Alyssa.
No, that's okay. I should have asked before.
Well, and Zoom has changed the approach for doing that. You don't enable screen sharing anymore. I will make you the co-host, and therefore feel free to share your screen.
All right. All right, so this is just a quick introduction on the Delaware Poor People's Campaign. Quickly, I will go over just on the national scale, though we are only one of 45 state chapters across the nation. So the National Poor People's Campaign, they have a tagline called "A Call for a National Moral Revival." And I'll give you a brief history of how this all started. It actually started in 1968 with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When he called for a revolution of values in America. He sought to build a fusion movement that could unite impacted communities, because he understood something that I think we all understand, is that building political capital within communities who are traditionally underserved is the best way to help those communities. It's not necessarily a lobbyist talking to a legislator, it's a group of people coming together to lobby for their own interests. And so today, the Reverend Barber and Reverend Liz Theo Harris brought together this National Poor People's Campaign to pick up that unfinished work. So the idea is to create different state campaigns in which we not only campaign for the interests of poor and underserved folks in our states, but also a national movement to confront those interlocking evils of systematic racism, poverty, ecological devastation. Excuse me, I've not spoken enough today and I'm tongue-tied. Militarism and the war economy, and also to combat that distortive moral narrative of religious nationalism. Let's see if I can move on here. There we go. So that national campaign brings together a lot of different state campaigns and focuses mostly on things that directly impact on the national scale. So the Senate, Congress, national moments that transcend state borders. So this summer, a great example of that work is this season of nonviolent action that every state chapter participated in with these larger goals of ending the filibuster, protesting state policies that are restricting access to the ballot box. I know several states passed horrible voting rights access legislation. Texas has been doing some terrible stuff just in general this year. But also demanding the passage of the For the People Act. This was John Lewis's bill. Basically, and again, all of this is just to bring together everyone for these national moments. So those events consisted of, I participated, and I know a couple other folks who are not part of our coordinating committee, but from Delaware, went to this Women's Moral March on Washington. We participated in direct action at Senate offices in the state. So a group of folks and I went to Senator Coons's office and Senator Carper's offices in Wilmington. There was a 27-mile march from Georgetown to Austin, Texas. There was a low-wage workers and religious leaders march on Washington, and also a mass moral motorcade on Manchin in West Virginia. All of this is to gain, not only media attention, but the attention of senators all across the nation to let them know that we are not sitting idly by and letting them get away with not doing, quite frankly, their jobs. So that's the national stage, but our work here in Delaware is a little bit more focused. We are building coalitions, we are participating in legislative advocacy, all to make sure that what's happening at the national scale to address poverty and inequality also happens here in Delaware. So some of those campaigns, this photo was taken, we had a lovely little event in March on the steps of Legislative Hall in Dover to send to our state legislators a 14-point policy priority document for things that we think that they should prioritize during their legislative session. Our direct advocacy, I have a list here. We advocated for a $15 an hour minimum wage, cannabis legalization, an end to debtor's prison, or as some folks know it, fines and fees reform, mandatory expungement under the Clean Slate initiative that was passed in Delaware, I think last year, and also changes to the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, LEOBOR, which I'm sure Lynn will give an update on after being in Newcastle and being in that meeting with in regards to body cams. And we haven't discussed this in detail as a body yet, but we do know that some of our goals, especially for this new legislative session coming up in January, are to pass what we couldn't last time. Cannabis legalization didn't make it through. Debtor's prison, LEOBOR didn't see the light. Didn't even see, a floor vote in last legislative session. So those are some things we want to work on. And also, we want to continue to build that engaged group of volunteers to ensure the success of our local, statewide, and also national campaigns. The folks who go to those national events are coming from here, from in the States, from our local state campaigns. I'm here tonight for two reasons. One, to tell you about the campaign and answer some of your questions, but also because in order to meet these goals, we need more people involved. And I know that this particular group of people is already very involved. So just some few goals that we have. We are building a communications team, policy teams, but also just bringing in folks to help us organize and connect with impacted communities. Our coordinating committee is a completely volunteer-based body, meets once a week for an hour. Some easy ways to get involved would be to join one of our meetings. One of the best ways to get involved is to spread the word. Get involved and engage with our social media posts, forward our emails to your friends. If we send out something regarding a letter campaign or saying call your senators, one of the best ways to help is to actually forward those messages so that more people are getting the message and getting involved. But also to connect us. If you have, give us introductions to people who you think would be interested in our work. People who are involved in their communities, because the way to grow this movement is through grassroots, just person-to-person contact. And so that is where the true value lies. If you really want to build that political capital, build the movement, the best way to do it is from neighbor to neighbor.
Alyssa.
Yes.
You told us to speak up, right?
I did, please.
I'm part of, I've been sent by an action program that has many members of a denomination in Delaware. And they wanted me to fact find what's going on here with the organization. And so looking to connect with you and appreciate your presentation. This appears to present an opportunity for a two-way communications between the organization that I'm part of and a rather large potential for the Poor People's Campaign.
That would be great. Thank you, Alan. I have my contact information on the screen right now. Please shoot me an email. Feel free to call me. That is my cell phone number. So I'm a millennial. I have it on my hip at all times. So you will get me.
I was wondering, just off the top of my head, since we're speaking of that, whether there would be the potential for us, for you to participate in a Zoom meeting with my organization.
I would love to.
Okay, good.
I would love
That'll
to.
be, we can look forward to that then.
Lovely. Yeah, definitely shoot me an email and we can discuss details that way.
All right.
All right. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
My vision, I'm trying to see it. I have it on my telephone, and so it's kind of small.
Oh, okay. Understood. Yeah.
202, but the area code is 908.
Yes, 908-892-4202.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And I can send this contact info out to you all. Lynn has all of my info. So if you need it, you can always contact her. But I just wanted to thank you all for, letting me share that with you. And if anyone has anything they'd like to ask me about or anything, please feel free. There's a lot of issues in Delaware, and also at the national scale that fit into this goal of reducing inequality and breaking that cycle of poverty. So please feel free to ask me anything.
I'll be writing to you. Thank you.
I'll share a piece of trivia.
Please.
I think I probably marched in a march against poverty or something in 1968 when I was in college. I remember it so vividly in Nashville, Tennessee, but I never made the connection until this minute. But
Well, there you go, Kristen.
I suspect that's what it was.
I'm wondering if the Poor People Campaign or the Poor People's Organization in Delaware has contacted or been in conversation with Smart Justice.
Not since I have been involved. Not that I know of. That is a good point, though. I will definitely reach out to them. If you have any contacts, or Lynn, if you have any, that would be a great avenue to.
Yes, so Bill and I both go to the meetings of the Coalition for Smart Justice, and when I introduce myself, I usually, say Peace and Justice Work Group from Westminster, Delaware Poor People's Campaign, Smart Justice. So Delaware People's Campaign is actually represented on the Coalition for Smart Justice, and we may not have explicitly, called them out by name, but we actually have forwarded, even through our Action Network, some stuff that came through Smart Justice. So we're sort of connected to them. But I think it would be great for you and Hanif Salam, who is currently organizing and running that coalition. It would be great for you to connect and see what else the two organizations or movements can do together.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. I'm gonna jot that down.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. That was a great idea.
Other comments, questions, suggestions, thoughts? Sally?
Thank you. Alyssa, could you say a little bit more about the policy work that you all do?
Sure. So I think for this last legislative session, we did a lot of work surrounding just getting the message out about canvases and phone banks that were happening around the Fight for 15. I spent a lot of time waiting in committee hearings to submit public testimony. But I think what we're working to do is trying to create more of a sustainable outfit, right? So folks who are plugged in, who know what's going on in the policy in the legislative world in Delaware, or who may not know it already, but are at least plugged in tangentially, who can give us some updates, right? So instead of having one person who is constantly spending a lot of time checking the legislative website to look at the votes and what's up in committee and relying on different organizations to tell us when they think things are going to come up, we would like to be able to have more of a sustainable structure of that already in the organization. So a lot of the policy work will involve things like giving public testimony, maybe writing up email short blurbs for our email updates to our members, and also working with folks, working with our Action Network to create actions in which people can participate in, whether that's a phone bank or a letter writing campaign or something of that nature.
Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, it doesn't have to be all one individual doing that. I think the idea is to make it so that we have a lot of people, or at least a few people, who are involved, so that it becomes less work for everyone.
For example, to divide up the legislation areas into certain categories or the like, that different folks could maybe focus on their forte, right?
Exactly. The point is, volunteering is supposed to be fun, right? People get involved in this kind of work because they're passionate about it, because they feel like they're making a difference, and because they're with a group of people who they genuinely enjoy being with. And so when it's a lot of work, it creates not a great environment for folks. And that's not the type of thing that I'm looking to do, that we're looking to do. We want to make sure that folks who are interested in, let's say you're interested in cannabis legalization, and you would be our point person for that piece of legislation.
Yeah, well, I like to do the legislative monitoring and communications and things like that, but I don't like to do all of it.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Well,
Lucy?
Alyssa,
Hi, Lucy. Yeah, is it Lucy?
I was
Yeah.
very fortunate to have gone to that poor people's thing down in DC a couple years ago. And
Lovely.
it was my intention at that time to be very active in the Poor People's Campaign. I was very invigorated by the poll message. I think the meeting down there was about 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 days, and at that time I was with a lady, and I'm telling you, I learned there that my limitations for competing or, involving myself would be limited, because it was there that I got sick, and I had to be helped home by the other people. But I want to tell you that the program is very vigorous, and there was another meeting that occurred here in Wilmington, because the lady that I met in DC came up and tried to organize, and they did try to organize, but I don't know what happened. But I do know that I was there, and there were some young people who were trying to hook up to make the Delaware chapter visible, but that didn't happen until, you've come along, and I'm grateful for that. So I want to let you know that I want to help, and I want to do whatever I can, but I'm not committing to any very vigorous stuff, because I know what my limitations are.
Of course. I think that's I'm encountering that same almost train of thought with a lot of folks that I've been contacting who were involved with some national events before. And I think the biggest difference is that when national does an event, it's huge, right? They want hundreds of people. They want to march for 27 miles, and it's awesome. And there are folks who can participate in those kind of actions. But that is not the type of thing that, I think would work or is helpful in Delaware. I think one legislator getting 15 handwritten letters from different constituents is a big enough deal that we don't necessarily need to have not that it would be terrible to do this, but have hundreds and hundreds of people show up for a march. And there are certainly ways to get involved that don't involve that. So Lucy, thank you. I will definitely get your contact information and follow up with you about ways to get involved, because that would be amazing.
Okay.
Alyssa, one of the things that's talked about here and other places is the importance of engaging the impacted communities. And typically that presents a challenge on a variety of fronts. how to make the communication work, how to engage the energy and understanding of people who are spending a lot of their time just putting one foot in front of the other and making sure that life works. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about either specific organizations to work with, communities to work with. What are the best ways that you can see to ensure that the communities, the people who are most directly impacted by these pervasive issues are having their voices heard?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a challenge with every single campaign, whether it's something that is environmentally focused or food access focused. When you're worried about putting what you're going to put on the table for your next meal to feed your kids, you're not worrying about how your senator voted on XYZ bill, right? I think the best way forward, and the way that I think the coordinating committee and I have discussed moving forward, is to partner with organizations that already have those relationships with those communities. Organizations like the SEIU, the labor union, organizations like there's Black women's fraternities, those types of organizations that already have that relationship and are already regularly communicating with those folks. Because I don't imagine that someone from an affected community will start volunteering 40 hours a week like it's their job. That's not the expectation. The expectation is to, or the hope rather, I shouldn't say expectation, the hope is that when we have these meetings and we're deciding pathways forward, that those voices are included in those meetings. When we're deciding what our policy priorities should be for the year, that the people who are going to be most affected by that policy change are the people who are voicing their opinions. Because I can only know so much. I do have a certain level of expertise, but it only goes so far. And so to have people with real lived experience who are not only educating, the coordinating committee and the organization, but also actively involved in the planning and the prioritization of the organization's goals would be ideal.
Thank you.
Alyssa, do you know if there is in Delaware a published nonprofits directory?
I don't know if there's one specific to Delaware, but there are national. I'm struggling to think of the
There's
name right
an
now.
organization. in
Charity
Delaware.
Navigator.
Yeah. There's an organization that lists all the nonprofits, and I've been to their website, but it's kind of hard to use to list them. And I thought to myself, that'd be great if it was compiled into a directory that could be shared.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do have a little bit of a unique situation. We do not have C3 status, so I don't know if we could be officially listed. But that is something to strive for and certainly look forward to doing in the future.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just add that, one of the things that I, continually struggle with in being part of the Poor People's Campaign is that, we are a movement, not an organization. And so you're not a C3. We don't have a lot of, organizational structure and things, but there is a national organization with structure. And so although we are trying to support a number of local campaigns that are in line with the values and the push that comes from national, we can also use those resources. So for instance, last fall, and Alyssa, this was before you joined us, before the elections, the National Poor People's Campaign was able to help set up a phone bank for us that had specific I don't know how they got a database with the demographics of poor people in Delaware and trying to get them to register to vote before the election. And so we were able to use that, resource from National to do that phone bank for something that mattered here in Delaware, for us. So in that ways, it's great being connected to the national movement.
Lynn, while you have the floor, would you like to share your experience this evening when you gave public comment? I believe the topic was body cameras. So while it's not specifically Leobor, it certainly is intimately related to criminal justice reform, systemic reform in Delaware. How'd it go?
It is. There were a small but mighty turnout. And we all were kind of saying the same sort of thing. And the small number of people from the committee this is the Council on Police Training, who is supposed to be developing the policies that flesh out the implementation plan for body-worn cameras in Delaware. So although the legislation has passed, the details of setting some minimum standards that all police departments would have to implement with their cameras is being left to this body. So they are now doing these listening sessions. We made clear that we were disappointed that to get community input, that instead of giving a virtual option, they chose to have an in-person option in a police facility that makes maybe not as inviting to some people who want to have their voices heard. So we tried to make that point. I think they are going to add a third listening session in Sussex County because they didn't have one planned there. And that one will have a virtual option. So those who would like to participate virtually will be able to. But all of us there were making the point that body cameras, paying to have them and start using them is great. But if there aren't policies that really help transparency that comes with the videos that are generated from those cameras, it's not going to do the job that we all wanted to do, which is to build trust in the community.
Yeah.
So I made the point, having been part of the community policing subcommittee on the Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force, everything we did was all about building that trust. And one of the big ways you build that trust is through transparency. So we did talk about, under what circumstances would the videos be released to the public, particularly when there are complaints about police conduct, or in a case of use of force, when there are these incidents that make the news, will that be released? And the folks in the room don't really, they're going to seek answers before the next meeting for us, because although they explain and we all understand that there are cases where the Attorney General's office will hold on to things and say, for reasons of prosecution, they need to hold on for a period of time to releasing videos, and they have that prerogative. Right now, Leobor would prevent any evidence of misconduct of a police officer from being released. And so we pose the question, since this is a new law and you are writing policy, directed to write this policy from this new law, will that have the potential to trump Leobor? Can you write an exclusion where you set a policy that says these videos will be released, even if it's, in a way that it can override Leobor, which might otherwise prevent it? They didn't have the answer for that.
Wow. They're just beginning. Yeah.
Right. So, but the police officers we spoke to were all very nice and genuine. Said they would try to seek answers. There was apparently supposed to be someone from the Attorney General's office there tonight who wasn't. So they will seek answers for us for next time. But it was very clear from everyone who spoke that they want clear regulations that require the cameras to be used, disciplinary procedures if they're not, that the videos that are recorded are kept and not discarded for a specified amount of time, and that those that are of interest to the public get released to the public. So
There needs to be a review procedure too. Have you seen the thing about Alabama? They have a big mess going on there because of recordings that have never been reviewed.
mm,
And it's a big mess down there right now. It's going through their state legislation and making a big news media frenzy about it.
okay.
And so, you know, if it all goes into an archive and is never reviewed by anybody, and they just sign off on it and it disappears forever, it's not doing anybody any good either.
Right.
Well, and clearly some of this legislation that's passing is kind of baby steps, you know, a step at a time. You look for a path forward. The implementation is often the most important aspect of it.
Yes,
We've seen the same thing with the passage of the law that requires teaching more inclusive US history in Delaware schools. It's great to pass the law. The real challenge becomes in the implementation, and how do you make it happen, and how do you make it happen effectively? So I think having opportunities for public comment, for continually shining a light on the process in terms of how it's going, or what's working well, and what needs improvement is really important. And I guess another question I would ask you, Alyssa, I mean, we're a pretty small state. We're a little bit new to the organizing around the Poor People's Campaign. I'm wondering if there are meaningful opportunities to partner with the Poor People's Campaign in one of the surrounding states, in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, New Jersey, Maryland, so that there's a little greater critical mass in terms of people in action, not so much directed, as you indicated, at the initiatives that are particularly important to our state, but to be integrated as part of the full Poor People's Campaign. It can be kind of easy, I think, as a little bitty state to get lost in the shuffle when trying to function as part of what's really a pretty giant organization, national organization overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have had the opportunity to speak with the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign in Philadelphia and also in New Jersey. Just when I first started, just to get an idea of, you know, how they function, what are their, you know, how is their organization, how is their movement structured, how is their, thank you, Lynn's laughing at me because I say organization too much. You know, how their coordinating committees are structured, and what are their kind of best practices. And we did get a chance to talk, but I think any of those regional kind of efforts are really more directed from the national organizers. There aren't really many regional governing bodies. The only one I can think of right now is the Delaware River Basin Commission, right? And so I remember when I was working for an environmental organization in New Jersey, we actually did do some engagement with the Philadelphia Poor People's Campaign and different environmental, there was a Greenpeace from Delaware and other organizations from New York and Pennsylvania, because, you know, the waters of the Delaware River don't have a state boundary, and yet most of our legislatures do. So that's a governing body. But that's the only regional one I can think of. And so for these kind of movements, I know it is true with the Delaware state legislature. I know it's true with New Jersey and Pennsylvania as well, having worked in both states, that they don't really, legislators will only really take into account the testimony of their constituents or people who live in their state.
Sure.
They don't want to hear from, you know, I don't mention that I'm from Philadelphia when I speak in at committee meetings in Delaware. And to that end, you know, I'm not sure campaign wise what we would, how that would fit. But I think it's a good point, because when it comes to things like, you know, if we're having a rally or an event surrounding a particular national policy, it would absolutely make more sense to team up with different Poor People's Campaigns chapters in the region. We haven't had the opportunity to do that as of yet, but that is a good point, Sue, and I will definitely keep that in mind, because those are, there's not, Delaware gets Philly news, right? So, so if we can get the Philadelphia Inquirer to show up for an event, that would be amazing.
Well, and it helps as a catalyst for more involvement from people in the state, because you got a higher profile that way. And I've worked with with another organization, another national organization, and they are trying to get started in Delaware. And so, but Delaware has no connection to any other affiliations or anything. And I can see that I'm going to have to change that.
Are there other questions or comments for Alyssa or on the topic in general?
I just had a quick one, Alyssa. I've obviously, from your introduction and reading some of the Poor People Campaign information that I get, immigration reform is kind of one of the bigger policies. But I wondered, our church has gotten involved in a lot of immigration scenarios for families in the past. And I was just curious, what's developing here locally in Delaware from your perspective?
Quite honestly, immigration is not something that that our coordinating committee has focused on while I've been in this position. Lynn might actually have more insight on that than I do. But what I will say is that and even nationally right now, I think the focus is more on ballot access than on immigration. And I think it's just because of the season, it's the summer leading up to November where people will actually, have to exercise those rights. But Lynn, if you have any more insight on the work we've been doing on that the Poor People's Campaign has done in immigration, feel free, because I don't. That's well met, though. I will get with National and ask what those efforts have been, because it is an important issue.
Yeah, the Delaware Poor People's Campaign, for the length of time that I've been involved, has not focused on immigration.
I was wondering, in your conversations, if I understood you right, you had a conversation with Coons and Carper with regard to the filibuster. What was your takeaway from those conversations with our two senators?
Well, Senator Carper's office was very responsive and sent us. We had a list of demands. One was ending the filibuster. Another was passing the full Voting Rights Act, or ratifying, I guess, the Voting Rights Act, and also passing a federal $15 minimum wage, as well as passing the full For the People Act. So he sent a very, very long and detailed emailed response to us, and I was very surprised and happy about that. He indicated that when it comes to the filibuster, he will take the lead of the president on, how to move forward with that. They would not take a hard stance, either one way or the other, on ending the filibuster, which does not surprise me in the least. Senator Coons's office, we never got a response from. We didn't have that great of an experience with his office, but they didn't seem very thrilled with the way that we contacted them. And so we will have to revisit that relationship at a later time once things have cooled.
Okay.
I'll
Thank
just
you.
add that we learned through Indivisible Highlands, I guess Indivisible National had gotten some insights that although all the focus is on Joe Manchin, that it was Delaware senators who behind the scenes were not being supportive and trying to convince others to not be supportive of ending the filibuster in an effort to help voting rights move forward. So Indivisible was putting in place a big effort to make phone calls and contact Carper and Coons to try to persuade them to get on board. And I guess it was just interesting because although they, publicly, or even sponsors of the voting rights stuff, were kind of sitting on, not taking a real public stance, or in a way leading the public to believe that they cared enough about it that they would vote for changing the filibuster. Behind the scenes were not. So it was all just kind of interesting seeing how, what different organizations were hearing. And, at least from Indivisible's standpoint, they felt that Delaware was the place to put the pressure on to get our federal delegation on board.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And from what I've seen so far in contacting their offices, and I do that a couple of times a week, is that they seem to be reluctant to implement something when they are afraid of how it might be used when the politics change in DC. Okay, that's the way I read between the lines, and that goes for both offices, but more for Coons' offices than for Carper's, perhaps.
Yeah,
This is
I would
Laura
have to agree.
Donahue. Sorry to have been muted. I belong to the Indivisible group that Lynn was referring to, and she's got it exactly right. In fact, I have another Zoom in 8 minutes with Indivisible National to talk about that exact thing there. For all of you, their continuing advice is call Carper and Coons every day. We're continuing to do that. We're also about to start a postcard campaign. And Alan, what how you described their view that they, but in particular, Senator Coons is worried about what might happen in 2022 or 2024 if Democrats lose control of the Senate.
That's my assessment
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
So if you have 5 minutes tomorrow, call both of their offices. Do it on
Well,
Monday. Do it on Tuesday.
I don't call them every day, but it's almost every day.
As often as you can. Thanks.
Thank you,
Moira,
Laura.
when you get that postcard campaign up and running, is that on Action Network? Is there any way that we could co-sponsor and get the word out to our network as well?
I don't know. I'm not personally involved in organizing it. I can find out. I think the way it's going to happen is we use the front porch of one of our members in the Highlands as our distribution point. But
Okay,
if
so
you-
analog, not digital. Got it.
Oh, it's analog. Yeah, it's
Okay.
analog. So Alyssa, I'll see what I can find out.
No worries. I just wanted to help and get the word out because I have to agree that after our communications with the senator's offices, it did seem that they wanted to pass off any responsibility on the president and not take any themselves. So,
well, I'm impressed that you got to Carper. We got a stone wall from both of them. So, yeah.
All right, work to do for sure. And that's what we're here for. We've all learned so much about what works and what doesn't. We understand so many of the gaps between what we think we could be and what we are. And we come to understand what are the obstacles and who are the obstacles getting in the way, and how do we mobilize to take action to make voices heard. So we'll look for ever more options for us. Speaking as someone who wrote more postcards to Georgia last November than I've written letters or postcards to every friend and family I've ever had in my whole life. I believe that there are some of these initiatives that make a real difference, and it can't hurt. So, and to Lucy's point, we don't have to be marching up and down Pennsylvania Avenue to do this. We can make our voices heard from home. So we'll look for you, Moira and Lynn and Alyssa and Alan to point out those opportunities to us so
Oh,
that
oh.
we can make a difference here.
I'll just mention, I see Sally Butner on the call. She's a member of Indivisible also.
Ah, great. All right. And Sally.
So after your nice concluding comments, can I jump in one more?
No.
time? This is really to Moira. Something I keep wondering about is how the Senate offices keep track of calls, and whether if I call every day, are they just going to say it's Butner again, ignore her,
No,
or does
no,
it
they
go
don't
in a
do
tick
that.
box?
They log it. They actually log it each day.
But if they get repeat calls from one person, do they stop paying attention, or do they keep logging?
No,
Keep
they log
logging.
it. They
Thank
log
you.
it.
They are legally required to take your phone call.
Thank you.
And, you know, some of us think that, golly, it's kind of rude to call people every day.
Yeah,
Squeaky wheel gets grease.
It's too important to worry about being really, really nice here.
gotcha.
I'm
Agreed.
with you, Maura.
Yep.
Yeah, too much time being nice doesn't get a whole lot accomplished.
They
So,
actually, once a week, they actually review those statistics, call statistics, according to the categories, according to the issues, as a committee.
all right, let's make calls.
Mhm.
Lynn?
One more thing. Yeah, I want to put Kim on the spot here and see if she wants to speak up, since Friendship House, their clientele is the poorest of the poor. And just see, if you were going to try to give input coming from that perspective, what would you say the Delaware Poor People's Campaign's priorities should be? Legislative priorities. What would you think would, help your clients the most?
I appreciate the question. I really think part of it is letting their voices be heard. And I know that seems obvious, and yet at the same time also seems impossible. So voting is really important, making sure that they have the option to vote. They have the option to get in front of legislation and speak, that it's not just those of privilege that are able to get there. I think that's critical. If nothing else, so they feel heard. I think that's really, really important. I have seen just time and time again of how fines and fees have held people back. So that would be, to me, probably one of the next big things, is really getting legislation around that, so that they're not being criminalized for being poor. That's just wrong. It's inhumane. So that matters a lot to me. But I really think getting voting rights really better handled in terms of making sure there's nothing holding someone back from being able to place their ballot. I think that matters a lot, and it gives people a huge sense of pride. And then finally, just trying to lift barriers in terms of not letting anything be in the way of somebody getting their state ID. I think, again, that is just a critical thing that affects people. And those that aren't familiar with the policy and aren't familiar with how critical that is, the two things you need, usually three, Social Security, but you have to have your birth certificate, your ID, and your Social Security card to do anything. And you need all of those to get each other. So if you don't have one, you can't get the other, which is very, very complicated process. So to get a job, to get an apartment, to get even services in the state of Delaware, any state agency requires that you have both those things to get help. So it is really a challenge for people who literally cannot afford the $40 to go get their state ID, let alone the fines that are preventing them, or the fear of going to show up and to get it. It's intense. So I appreciate the moment, Lynn. Anything that I can do, I think this matters so much to me. And Alyssa, you were speaking earlier, maybe it was someone else, about the voices. We do work with a lot of people. So any way that I can get their voices heard, to get them part of this initiative, that's one of the reasons I wanted to join too, was to help advocate on their behalf. So anything that we can do to get them there, whether it's listening sessions or more, I think it's critical.
And
So
Kim, what
thank
is
you for
your
your doing.
organization?
Kim, is there any need for volunteer support to help people get the documents that they need?
Yes. Alan, to answer your question first, I am the executive director of Friendship House. We are a nonprofit. We are a 501c3, focusing mostly on Newcastle County, but we drift out of that probably more than we should sometimes to help others downstate in the other counties and across lines. But we are working with people who are experiencing homelessness and homelessness across the board of various levels, not just houselessness.
I used to work with Carl Mazza, and my wife did too. Mhm.
Wonderful meeting ground. Yeah. So we are here because of his adventure with churches. So that's fantastic, Alan. Sue, to answer your question, yes, there are so many different ways people can volunteer with that specific thing of documentation. We were just talking about this last night at the Campaign Den Debtors Prison meeting. One of the things we're noticing, so we've created with Lynn's help and her crew to create a fines and fees fund. So as Alyssa had noted, they're not a they're not a 501c3. We are, so we can accept donations. So we are accepting donations on behalf of the fines and fees fund, and 100% of that money goes to help people who cannot pay off their court fines and fees. One of the things that we have noticed is that people are too scared, anxious, nervous to go to the courts, even to make a call to find out how much they actually owe and to find out what steps can be taken to minimize that payment, whether they can start making payments, do they have to pay the full amount? What is the situation? Because they are literally wanted by the police. So they have a warrant out for their arrest. So they're too scared to show up and turn themselves in. That's the phrase that's actually used in order to start the ball rolling to clear the fine and fee. If they don't show up, we can't get it cleared. So one of the things we want to do is have advocates who are willing to go with them to court, whether it's on Zoom, a phone call, or physically in person, so that they have someone there. So God forbid they do get arrested, which they won't, 99.9% of the time, they're not arrested. But they just have someone there who then, if they, it helps their anxiety, helps their fear, but also it's an advocate, someone else who can speak up. So that's one huge thing. And the other is making phone calls and getting out to people to explain what the steps are. You've asked for help. Let us help you get through this process. In terms of the actual documentations, potentially going with people to the DMV. The other thing we've heard on the street is that people don't want to go to the DMV to reinstate their ID if they're wanted by the police for fear of getting turned in at the DMV because there are people in uniform on site. So again, a lot of advocacy of just showing up with an individual to be their companion, to help them, is something that we want to start getting volunteers to help us with. So, but there's other non-in-person ones. Please do, Alan. I'll put my information in the chat box. But and there's other things we want to do where we can get some more help, more legwork that's phone, computer based. So we're working on that as well. So thank you, Lynn, for that question.
Kim, can a homeless person vote if you don't have a specific address, or if the person wanted to vote, is there any way that they can get a ballot?
They have to have a state ID with a valid address, and that's the biggest thing. It has to be not expired with an address. And so typically that address has to be relatively active where you've been there sometime in the past year. So it is very, very difficult. Most cannot.
Thank you.
I'll follow up with you, Kim, to see what we might be able to do. This is not so much the Peace and Justice Group, or perhaps Urban Mission sponsored, in terms of ways to encourage volunteers to get engaged in ways that fit, that work. That would be great.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Alyssa, for bringing us up to date. And there is no shortage of things to do. So nobody should feel like they just get to sit around because nothing's needed. It's a matter of finding where's your passion, where can you make a difference, and get moving. So thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It was so nice meeting you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Good
Alyssa.
night.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kim, Sue.